Hi, I'm Corey, and this is 10 things you should know before you book Contiki. Some kind of intro here. So I'm recording this in October of 2018, and I've done 5 Contiki so far. And oftentimes people ask me various questions about Contiki, and I thought I'd try to answer some of those questions in a YouTube format. So starting with number 10, people do often travel solo, and so should you. If you have someone to go with, obviously, then go with them, but don't be afraid to travel solo. Of the 5 Contikis I've done, 4 of them I've actually traveled on my own. About 50% of the people are probably with somebody else, whether it's a significant other, best friend, a sister. The rest of the people are just like myself. They're there on their own and they're looking for people to become friends with. So you'll get paired with a roommate. That roommate is usually single as well, unless they're part of a threesome, in which case they're just the odd man out. And beyond that, don't be afraid. You're going to make great friends, and do not be afraid to travel solo if that's the position you're currently in. You won't regret it. Number 9 is that not all trips are created equal. They have what they call modular trips, and Contiki is not the only company that does this. Top Deck does it as well, G Adventures. In fact, I think every company has a modular trip. What that means is that the group of people you start with might not be the same people you end with, and you might start a trip that's already in progress. Contiki does not make it very easy to find this out if you're just booking through a travel agent or booking online. What I suggest you do is go to their brochure, download it, and on the trip that you're thinking of doing, look in the fine print. This trip is part of a bigger picture. When you jump aboard this trip, you'll be joining a group of other travelers who have been traveling on this trip. Wait until you see the warm welcome you'll receive as a new addition to the group. Now, that particular scenario is what I would actually consider the worst case scenario. It can be very difficult to integrate yourself with a new group, especially one that's been traveling and very close. Now, you might get lucky and there might be someone on that trip that's desperately looking for somebody else to hang out with, but it's a lot harder when you're the new person coming in, especially if you're the only new person coming in. There is another type of modular trip, which, looking at this one from Asia Adventure, notes you'll be saying goodbye to your group as they depart for Vietnam. In this particular case, there's actually another trip that's going to be starting at the end of your trip. It's not as bad when you have a large group of people joining and a large group of people leaving, but again, something to be aware of, and potentially it will change your mind about whether or not to book a larger trip if you have more time permitting. Number 8, you're probably going to spend a lot more money than you think. The cost of the trip isn't the only expense. There's also the flight over. You're also going to be drinking a lot, you're going to be eating a lot, you're going to be partying a lot. There's free time optionals or free time add-ins, and those start adding up pretty quickly if you do all of them. And I do recommend you do a lot of them because I find that they're often some of the best, most memorable things you do on a trip. And then you also have souvenirs and transportation such as taxis or Ubers you have to pay for. It can add up very quickly, and I would recommend that you budget between $200 to $500 per week that you're going to be on Contiki. Number 7, group sizes vary depending on the region and depending on the season. So the summer in Europe, you're going to have around 50 people on your Contiki, and it's the same for North America in the summer. In Asia, you get around 30 people depending on the season. I don't mind the large groups. I think the big plus of having a large group is that you're guaranteed, or almost guaranteed, to find someone that you're going to get along with. When you've got only 15 people on a trip, such as G Adventures, the likelihood of you finding someone is a little bit smaller, and there's a bit more trepidation on my part booking a trip thinking, oh geez, what if I'm not gonna like anybody on that trip? But it does get overwhelming at times. Finding a spot for 50 people, you usually get set meals as a result, but I wouldn't necessarily let it stop you. Just be aware that there's gonna be a lot of people on these trips. Number 6 is that you can actually connect with people before you even book the trip. You need to have booked the trip before you use the Contiki app. The Contiki app is a pile of garbage, and I do not recommend you use it. I have almost never had any success with it. But you can go to Facebook and do a quick search looking for the particular trip you're going to be doing, as well as the start date, and you'll often find a lot of people already mingling and chatting before the trip even begins. So you might get a pretty good idea of what kind of people are going to be on the trip. Maybe you can determine what the age range is going to look like. And if a group doesn't exist and you already booked the trip, why not create it yourself so you can actually start meeting people ahead of time? You're going to have a Facebook group created during the course of the trip anyway, because that's the way everyone keeps in touch. Every day when you get the day sheet, someone's going to take a photo of that and upload it to Facebook. So at some point in time, you're going to want to have a Facebook connection with everyone. So you might as well be the one who starts it. Number 5 is that age ranges can vary. I know a lot of people are afraid of being the youngest person on the trip or being the oldest person on the trip. And my only advice to you is don't worry about it. There's so many people on these trips. You're gonna have a lot of people that are older than 30, and you're gonna have a lot of people that are younger than 30. And Contiki has a very strict 18 to 35 policy. You typically get a younger group overall. There are gonna be people who like to sightsee more than they like to party. And because of these large groups, that's not gonna be an issue because the people who like to sightsee are gonna typically hang out with the people who like to sightsee. Age isn't much of a factor in that case. Number 4 is that there will be very long travel days ahead. You might have a day where you've got 5, 6, 7, 8 hours of travel, and there's really no way to avoid that with the amount of ground Contiki's going to cover in a very short period of time. I think they're a great opportunity to catch up on sleep. Going to the washroom might be the only real thing that becomes a big factor, and just make sure you don't drink so much water that you have to go pee, but that you drink enough water to recover from the alcohol you've had the night before. You only go number 1, never go number 2 on a bus. They have a very difficult time offloading whatever's been put into that toilet, so typically just plan your meals and your drinking around the period of time that you're going to be stopping off at a convenience store along the way, and typically, again, every 2 hours. Number 3 is that the accommodations are fine, and I don't mean that like in a negative. Like, I don't understand why people actually complain so much about the accommodations. I see it on blog posts, I see it on vlogs where people just talk about how awful the accommodations are, and I've actually stayed in a few of the same accommodations I've seen these people complain about, and I've had 0 issues with them. I've never felt unsafe, I've never felt unclean or uncomfortable. They're fine. They could probably be in better locations at times. I know in Athens, this was, 7, 8 years ago, we were in a very sketchy part of town, and that kind of sucked, but the hotel itself was fine. Some of the things you get to do on Contiki is get to stay in really cool exclusives. So there's a beautiful chateau in Beaujolais in France that you get to stay at, and it's actually owned by Contiki. And then there's other places that actually aren't exclusives, like this place in Thailand where we got to stay on a floating raft accommodation. Yeah, they're not 5-star hotels, but you're not paying for a 5-star hotel. And that leads actually perfectly into number 2, which is you can book your own room. This is something that if you go through a travel agent, you're probably not going to be aware of, but for usually around $100 extra a night, which granted gets expensive, you can usually book your own room. There are going to be times where you want to crash early and your roommate's going to want to stay out another 3, 4, 5 hours, and they're going to be stumbling home at 3 or 4 a.m., turn the lights on, wake you up anyway. Or vice versa, maybe you're the guy that's stumbling home in the middle of the night and you're waking everybody up and you feel bad about it, or at least I hope you feel bad about it. So that can be an issue. I have often done work on my trips, so I might be up late on my laptop and I don't want anyone to be awake, so I make sure that I have my own room so that I'm not the annoying guy with the laptop glow keeping people up at night. I'd only recommend you do it if you can afford it and you really need your personal space. And lastly, the number 1 thing you should know before you book Contiki is that by the end of it, you will have your heart broken. In more ways than one, potentially. So these people that you meet on this trip are gonna be like your family after, 10, 12, 14, 20, 47 days. And when you say goodbye to them on that last day, you're gonna never see the majority of them ever again. You do grow very close to these people, and just be aware you might have your heart broken. And you might actually find love on Contiki. I had a best friend when we did the first Contiki together, and 10 years later he actually married a girl that he met on Contiki. And that's just one story, and there's been many more like that. So yeah, you're gonna get your heart broken, but you might also find someone who completes your life. So that is 10 things you should know before you book Contiki. And please like and subscribe if you enjoyed what you saw. I do actually plan on doing more videos like this if there's interest out there. I would like to do some reviews of previous trips I've been on, maybe packing tips of what you should bring on a Contiki, maybe talks about some of the Contikis that are upcoming in 2019 and what I think they would be like and which ones I plan on doing. So yeah, thanks for your time, and please check out some of my other videos, such as this one where I actually do a video recap of my trip in Bangkok.